Like I need y'all awake because I'm not gonna talk at y'all this whole time. I'm actually gonna make y'all work. So we can keep you awake for this hour. Thank you guys for having me. Dr. Charmaine Troy. I am currently the Associate Director for First Generation Student Initiatives at Georgia Tech. I launched the program at Georgia Tech on my arrival in 2021. Prior to that, I launched the First Gen program at Virginia Tech. I was Assistant Dean for First Generation Student Support there. So as you all can see, I have quite an affinity for First Gen students. I started the program at Georgia Gwinnett College as well. So 3 different institutions, 3 different types of institutions, different students, all the same game. So as I told you all before, this is my passion, and it was based on my own experience as a first gen student. How many of you are first generation? Yes, awesome. So you all understand where I'm coming from. But yeah, so this is the work that I do is based on my own experiences as a first generation student when I was in college. And so this is why I do the work that I do. So before we get started and like talking about hidden curriculum and how faculty can support first gen students, I want to give a little bit of context first. So I like to always put this up on the screen first because I want people to understand that it is our responsibility to support our first generation students and their success on our respective campuses. And so I always put this up when I'm doing my presentations, especially to faculty, because I want to make sure that you all understand the needs and that first generation students are not the same or having the same experiences as your continuing generation students. And when I mean continuing generation students, those are the students whose parents have gone to college and graduated and are readily accessible to them in terms of answering all their questions and having brought them up and preparing them for college. So a couple of things that faculty should know. Number one, you should know who your first generation students are and know their strengths and their needs. I'm not saying their weaknesses. Notice I didn't put weaknesses up there because that's not what I want us to focus on. And sometimes, a lot of the times, when we are looking at first generation students, we are focusing on their weaknesses instead of their strengths. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. Number two, I want you to consider new models and approaches for engaging first generation students in your work. So there's a lot of good literature, scholarship out there right now about supporting first generation students. My own plug, I just published a book about a year or so ago. So my book is out there as well in terms of programming, successful programming that's already out there from different institutions at different institutions across the board who are doing great first gen work, and that is including faculty. And so that stuff is in there. So make sure that you're considering new models for engaging students. And number three, I want you to identify ways to create communities of learners. How do you get first generation students engaged in being first generation, their strengths? How do you get them incorporated to the classroom? Because we want to bring diverse voices to the classroom. Just to give you all like a little idea or thought, so this past fall semester, I actually taught a course in being first generation in pop culture. So I made it a little fun, and we looked at different things in terms of different venues of pop culture. So we looked at books. You know, I had students read a book. It was actually Viola Davis's book, autobiography. She's first generation. A lot of first gen themes in that book. We watched the movie Coda. She's first generation. And so like when you're looking at, you know, the music, we looked at hip hop and first generation lyrics throughout and themes throughout hip hop music. We looked at all avenues to make it fun, to shine the light on first gen themes within pop culture. And so engaging them in different ways. That's why we talk about new different models and approaches and thinking about the ways that we, you know, introduce students to these concepts, but let it be fun and engaging. And by the way, when I tell you they love that hip hop class, I love that hip hop class. I actually went and taught it at a conference too. And the people in the conference loved it. It was completely full, standing room only. So fun stuff. But anyway, I digress, so you keep going. So understanding the first gen identity. So again, we want to put a little bit of context behind this and talk about the identity and helping us understand the identity. So we're defining first generation. We want to understand how to serve students better, considering their intersectionality. That is so important that we look at the different intersections of that identity. And then, like I talked about before, shifting the asset-based lens, looking at their strengths instead of their weaknesses. So here is the definition that is typically used across the board. This is the one that NASPA uses. The NASPA First Gen Center uses this definition as well. So first gen students identified as a first generation college student, either parent or guardian has earned a bachelor's degree at a 4-year college or university. At Georgia Tech, we add the United States on there as well, in the United States, because we have a number of students that's coming from overseas whose parents may have went to college overseas, but did not go to school here, don't understand the education system here. And so we want to be respectful of that in terms of, you know, letting them identify as first generation and getting our services if they want to. So what is the understanding? So I want to include a couple of student perspectives, and actually one of these perspectives is my own from when I was first gen, or I'm still first gen, but when I was in undergrad as a first gen student. So number one, they have this type of mentality. First gen have a lot of what we call stress on their shoulders because they are the first in the family to go to college, and so everybody's expecting them to be great, do great, you know, come back a doctor, lawyer, whatever, you know, grade is to the parent, but they feel like they owe it to their families to finish. You send me first. So a lot of students are feeling a lot of pressure and stress about, you know, having this identity and about, you know, having to take this on. Number two, sometimes there is no family support. And for me, I had family support. My mom, because I was brought up in a single family household. So my mom was very supportive, sent me what she could. But when I first moved into my dorms, I did not have, you know, you see a lot of people, they got the whole family with them. You know, they got, you know, carpets, microwaves, you know, refrigerator, decorations, color-coded, you know, designer, yes. And I'm like, that was not my experience. I came to college with $20. That's all I had. I had $20. My cousin took me, dropped me off. That was it. I didn't have the party that you see now. I had to earn my money to get my microwave, to get my refrigerator. So we're not getting all that, you know, that glitz and glamour. Number three, like I said, we're not wealthy. Again, I went to college with 20 bucks. And that's all my mom could afford to send me with at the time. I had to wait for my financial aid to come in. So you have some first year students that are, well, not wealthy, no, limited income students. I call them limited income, but low income. But you also have first generation students that are wealthy, so don't discount that as well. Because FYI, Bronny James is first generation, he's loaded. Yes. And finally, missing home and family. So I had a first gen student at Virginia Tech. She was wealthy, she came from a wealthy family. She went home every weekend because she missed her family. And if you were going home every weekend, you are not you're not emerging into institutional culture and learning the institution and, you know, making friends and, you know, getting to know people. If you're running home every weekend, and you have a lot of first gen students that's doing that. And so when we put these programs into place, what we're trying to do is to help them to, you know, learn more about institutional culture, get used to being here, make new friends, build community. That's so important. So intersectionality, as I call first gen plus. So while first gen students have that identity of being first generation, they also may have other identities that go along with it. For me, mine was first generation and minority, limited income. You know, you have other identities as well that students may hold, LGBTQ in first gen, or LGBTQ minority in first gen. I mean, there's so many different things surrounding the intersectionality that it actually is a driving factor in how we support our students. We have to take all of these identities into consideration when we are doing, when we're planning and doing this work. And so we don't want to make any assumptions or misconceptions at all, because that leads to gaps in programming. And so, again, making sure that we are taking their intersectionalities into play when we are working with our students. And finally, shifting from that deficit-based lens to asset-based, we want to help first-generation students understand what their assets are, what their strengths are, and we want them to plug into those strengths and help them bring their strengths out instead of focusing on their shortcomings. And a lot of work is based on shortcomings. And so we need to change that mindset and celebrate and enhance this identity. One of the things that I did when I first started this work was every institution I've been at, I've had t-shirts made that says I am first gen, and wristbands. I've given it to faculty, staff, students, everybody, because we are marrying this into institutional culture. We don't want students to be, afraid to let other people know they're first generation, or we want to celebrate it. We have some students, I had twins who came to Virginia Tech that were first generation. I said, who's first generation in this classroom? One twin raised their hand, the other one didn't. I'm like, but your brother's sitting right here. Why are you not raising your hand? Because he didn't want anybody to know. I'm like, I was like, that's crazy why you don't want anybody to know. And I'm like, so you have some students that are like that don't want people to know that they're first generation. And I want students to realize that this is a beautiful identity to have. And so this is why I'm all about shifting institutional culture, and it has to be institutional. It can't just be in my department. So I need the help of the faculty, the president, our president, Georgia Tech's first generation. So he's come to talk to our students multiple times about his journey. So just engaging everybody into this process. And like I mentioned before, you've got to have faculty and staff who are first gen really share that with their students, especially in the classroom. Share that. So let's talk about the hidden curriculum. And when I talk about me not talking to you all this time, we're going to do a little group breakout. And I'm like, yeah, there's enough people here to do breakout groups, just 2. But we'll do that in a second. So hidden curriculum, it refers to the unspoken or implicit values, behaviors, procedures, and norms that exist in an educational setting. So, like I mentioned before, our students, they're continuing generation students, they already know, in Georgia Tech, they already know the campus fight song, they know who the mascots are, they know the Rambling Wreck. I didn't know the Rambling Wreck when I started working there. I ain't gonna lie. I'm like, what's a Rambling Wreck? Like, oh, it's the car. Oh, I don't know that. They have a whole book of Georgia Tech traditions at Georgia Tech. And the kids whose parents went, they already know it. The kids whose parents are multimillionaires or very well off, they already are telling their students before they even get to college what to do. In terms of like being competitive in the classroom, internships, co-ops, all that. They're telling them that up front. They know the game. And our first year students, they don't. And they're looking at us, or they're just kind of stumbling through it, trying to figure it out. But especially in the classrooms, because a place like a Georgia Tech is super competitive. I've never seen nothing like it. And so when these students are in the classroom, you have students who are very confident, and you have the ones that are super quiet. Now, do y'all have that here? The students that are very confident, and the ones that are super quiet that you have to pull teeth to get them to talk. Oh my God. You have those. And so sometimes you might figure out that they might be first gen. So what we want to do is build a curriculum that is focused on inclusion versus exclusion. So how do we do that? We want to make sure that we discuss the expectations for our classrooms. What gets me an A? I don't want to have a student try to figure that out. I want that spelled out. I'm gonna tell you what that is the first day. What gets an A? What gets a B? What gets an F? Make it clear. Make it clear in your syllabi. So students are not trying to figure it out. And I feel like, especially at Georgia Tech, a lot of faculty members aren't being very clear. It's survival of the fittest. Make sure you incorporate diverse voices and perspectives into your coursework. Make sure that you are engaging all of your students into the conversation. Allow your students to connect their lives with what they're studying. This is the reason why I was like, let's do pop culture. I was like, I'm bringing this idea, like, let's do pop culture, because students talk about pop culture all the time. So I was like, you don't know that some of this stuff is like first-gen thing that you're looking at. You know, we're gonna make this fun, but we're gonna also incorporate your experiences into what we're talking about. And that's what really brought them there all the time. Teach students institutional values, academic success strategies, and use institutional resources. Make sure you're encouraging them in your classroom to use institutional resources. If you see your students are failing, pull them aside and have a conversation, genuine conversation with them about some success strategies for your class, and let them know about the institutional resources. And now I know sometimes we tell students all the institutional resources on the first day of class, don't we? Do they go? No. We know they don't go. But what I want you all to do is kind of meet students where they're at. And so that is super important, that we've got to start meeting students where they're at. And that could be outside the classroom. A lot of the times it is outside the classroom. Encourage them to come to your office hours if you got some. Meet them for some coffee and talk to them. You know, let them know that you care. So this is what we want to do in terms of meeting our students where they are. We know that the classroom is the primary location for our faculty and students and their peers to meet. It's the meeting of the minds, it's the classroom. So we want to make sure that we're mindful of costs, of course, but also we want to foster collaboration instead of competition. So make sure that you got your students working together instead of competing. So the first thing I did on my first day of class was I broke my students out in groups, and they stayed in those groups all year. Why? Because I wanted the students to quietly get to know each other. They didn't know what I was doing. But by the time they were finished with my course, the ones that were in groups, they were all friends. And they were talking to each other outside the class, and they were hanging out. And they were caring about one another. And they were working together and getting the work done in my class. That's what they were doing. So that's what we want to do. We want to provide a supportive and caring environment for our students. Again, let students know that it's okay to come and talk to you. I absolutely had an open door policy. I would hang out after class if anybody needed to talk to me. And when I had my students broken out into groups, I would pop over to every group. They knew me personally. I wasn't just Dr. Troy, they knew me personally, because I was going to sit in their groups all the time and chat them up when I had them doing their breakout work. And so allowing for faculty and students and student interaction, like I just talked about, we gotta allow for that student interaction so they can get to know their peers, so they can get to know us. That's the most important thing, is that they need to get to know us. We don't want them to feel isolated. We don't want them to go home. And that's what you see a lot of students who are not immersed in institutional culture and not making friends, they're ready to go home. They're not enjoying it, or they're ready to transfer. And so this is the way that we combat that. And I'm a huge proponent of doing that up front. And so I'll talk about that a little later on, and how I'm doing that before they even get to college. All right, so now we're gonna do our breakout, because like I said, I want you all to make sure that you're staying awake, that you're talking, having some discussion. And so I put a group project dynamic scenario up on the screen here, and I want you guys to look through this. And in your discussion in groups, if you could break out, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so y'all can kind of just split it and talk through this scenario, identify the implicit social norms or expectations that you're seeing at play in this scenario, reflect how these norms may create barriers for first-gen students, and brainstorm potential ways to mitigate the barriers and how do you support first-gen students in this scenario. And so I'm gonna give y'all about 10 minutes, and then we're gonna come back and each group is gonna share what they came up with. Cool?
Tyler mentioned how we can really break down our language and start from the basics of explaining what I mean by a case study, and how that can make it so that every student is on the same playing field and feels empowered to really learn rather than maybe starting from a place of confusion. If you're less exposed to a certain idea or process.
You know, it's interesting at Virginia Tech, they actually had on our website, the one for students and families, and also on our website, we actually had a guidebook that had college terms in it. Yep. So think about that. It might be something that if you all don't currently have that for like incoming students. Like, you know, some students don't know what a bursar is, what a registrar is, and what they do. And so all that is like spelled out in that book, the handbook. Okay, so sorry to interrupt. Keep going.
We also talked a little bit about how really bringing in students' experiential knowledge into the specifics of the assignment and how you assign it can help each student really feel empowered to bring their own knowledge that's, you know, very specific to them, and how it shows them that their experiential knowledge is key, really important, and something that, you know, no one else in their group can offer. I think it can be really empowering, but also can create a, you know, better research.
And modeling humility, and saying that you don't know as a professor, so that, and then when you don't know, then asking students to look it up in class, so that people don't feel bad about asking questions.
I agree with that, definitely. Group 2. What came out of your discussions?
We talked about multiple things and thinking about groups, explicit social norms, potential ways to mitigate barriers. Remember how I said not making it such a big group? I love that she said pairs. And I thought, ooh, that's a way to sort of make it more, you know, the coming in, the ownership on, it's not spread out.
Yeah.
It's not spread out. We also, Andrew likes to scaffold and create more structure. Say more about that.
Yeah, it's a good way to kind of make explicit the implicit social norms about group work. So rather than, if your objective is for students to, in this case, if the learning objective is to perform a critical analysis, and but group work is part of it, scaffolding and setting clear expectations and roles for every member of the group kind of makes the hidden curriculum visible, right? It makes it explicit. We talked about some other situations where kind of learning group work skills might be a more critical part of your learning objective, and there you get some value by having students try things and then reflect on them. But in some of my courses, I like a lot of structure around group work, so that students aren't uncomfortable or unsure about what roles individual group members are. There's clear expectations, students have a chance to talk about them, discuss them with each other. And then learn from that as well as the other objectives of the activity.
So, I think those are some great suggestions. So, you all just talked about, what you all just summarized, the common themes and the strategies that came out of your groups, I want you to commit to implementing at least one of those strategies that you discussed during your activity, within your teaching practices, or if some of the things that you talk about maybe gave you some ideas, maybe look into some, models that someone else may be doing, commit to, investigating new models based on some of the ideas or stuff that you've heard, and look at incorporating that into your teaching practices. Because again, it's very important that we be completely honest and forthright with what we expect from students in our classrooms. So some of the key takeaways here. Faculty is so important. I was just telling my students Friday night, we just had a reception for our admitted first generation students that was accepted at Georgia Tech. And I talked about the importance of faculty and how faculty members are not unicorns, because some students are scared of faculty. They truly are. Like, I guess they feel like you all have this power, like this evil power. And I'm like, we're not evil. And I actually shared a story with them about a faculty member at USC Chapel Hill, God rest his soul, that was very instrumental in my experience at Chapel Hill and of me getting into the journalism school there. Dr. Chuck Stone, he was a phenomenal man. And for me, I like to share that story with students because I want them to hear that faculty is they're nice. A lot of them have power. And they could give you mentorship and guidance and things that students are certainly not aware of. But if they just actually have a conversation with them, and an honest conversation, not I need something from you, I'm only gonna come to you once, is I wanna get to know you as well as you get to know me. I actually had a student came up to me the second day of my class and asked me for a job, and I gave her one. But she had the guts to come up to me and ask me for a job. She was first generation, and she was like, I need a job. I was like, I got you. Bring me your resume. Let's talk. I hired her. Kept her around. Because I want to have that interaction. I want her to have a good experience at Georgia Tech. She does all of our first gen events. She's joined the first gen club. She's a officer now on the executive board. Helping her get, immersed in institutional culture. And so we can help our students. If we interact with them outside that classroom, it promotes student persistence and educational aspirations. We all can point them in the right direction of whatever field that they're interested in, whatever career they're interested in. You all may have connections, fellowships, research assistantships, lab, especially like when I gave a talk in the biology department, and all these students are having to, a lot of students, especially first generation students, don't know how to get into labs, like start working at labs. And when I was listening to the process, I was like, this is difficult. Like, how are y'all letting students know like this is available and, the process of contacting a faculty member and saying, hey, I'm interested in working in your lab. How do I go about doing that? I'm like, how are y'all making that clear to students? Because there's students already know it and know how to do it. And then there's the ones that are just kind of like blindly, like maybe email a faculty member. If they don't email them back, they're not gonna go after it anymore. And so, again, we want to encourage students to come talk to us and to learn these things. Like I said, this biology stuff, it was complicated for me. And listening to what they have to do. And so we want to make sure that our students know how to do this and include them. And so again, we want to include ways for our students to contribute to class discussion. We want to make sure students know that there is no dumb questions. We only have answers. Because some students think their questions are stupid. They want other students to hear their questions. And we want to make sure that they have the floor and the space to ask questions so they have clarity. But like I said before, we also want to make sure that we provide clarity in our syllabus and supportive language in our syllabus. You know, especially about office hours or inviting you to come talk to me. My door is always open. So make sure that we're including supportive language in there, in your policies and descriptions in your syllabus. We must use effective educational practices, provide timely targeted feedback communication. Don't let your students get to midpoint, halfway, midterms, they're failing, do not tell them. Make sure we're telling them and and not doing it in front of the entire classroom, but having conversations on the side and encouraging them, not chastising them about their performance. How do we encourage them to turn things around? That's what because if you like chastising them, you're gonna make them shut down. But if you're not chastising them and you're encouraging them and saying, you can get this done, you can do this, you will see a change. We want to build in high-impact activities, practices into the work. You know, you talked about reflection, Andrew. I'm a huge fan of reflection. So, you know, doing those types of things or any other high-impact assignments that really get students working, thinking, engaged into the work. We want to do that. Again, require collaborative learning, support the social process. Again, like I talked about, getting them in, you know, immersed into institutional culture. How can we support their social process and getting to know their peers? And also normalizing and modeling self-advocacy and help-seeking behaviors. We want students to know it is okay to go get help. When I was a freshman at Chapel Hill, I was bombing. Let me tell you, I bombed my first year at Chapel Hill. I bombed. And when I saw myself sinking, I was like, I got into this institution. I am too smart to be going to tutoring. I can figure this out. Oh my God. Y'all know how many students you got think like that? How many students have you run into that think like that? Yeah, it's common. And I tell students up front, like I told them Friday night, along with their parents, I was like, a smart student is one that is proactive, that know when they are not good in a subject or they are weak in a subject, and they go get help out the gate. A smart student is proactive, not reacting to a bad grade. And that's what we see a lot of students doing, is reacting to bad grades. And when they're reacting, it's already past midterms, it's near finals, it's too late. So we want to make sure that we encourage them to have help-seeking behaviors and go to tutoring. I'm like, it's already paid for, your tuition, you're paying for it. People are there, and it's different types of instruction. There's supplemental instruction, one-on-one tutoring. I mean, everything you could possibly think of exists. There's no way you should be taking advantage of this. So let them know it's okay to get help. We want to make sure that we are empowering our students and letting them know they belong here. They belong here. You belong here, you work here, we respect your experiences, we respect your voice, you belong on this campus, we need you here. We need you out here in this world, doing the good work, getting into good trouble. We need all that. So make sure that we are encouraging our students, letting them know that they belong here. We want to advocate for change as well. We want to reduce barriers. I have so many students coming to me. You know, I have some homeless students coming to me. I've had students, from grad students to undergrad. Had students come to me who, she has 2 children. She's undergrad. And I'm like, people think that's, you know, it's not common. In some situations it is common. And that's the thing I'm having to fight with senior administration with is I know you feel like every undergrad student don't have children. That's not the case in everybody's story. Can we change our policy where we have some policy in place where we can help supplement some child care for students who need assistance, who need someone to watch their children while they're in class? Because this student could not afford child care. was homeless for a while and had 2 children, and God knows the experience that she had gone through, to even still try to be at Georgia Tech. And she needed childcare, she needed money. And so sometimes some of us that have voices and, you know, our seats at the table can advocate for the students and letting administrators know that we need to put these policies in place. We need to change something, we need to reduce barriers. How can we help these students? So make sure that you are a loud advocate for your students. First generation and non-first generation. Across the board. Be an advocate. So, that is the end of my presentation. You all are free to connect with me, follow me on social media, shoot me a message, you can email me, however you want. I'll be so happy to engage with you all outside here. If you got any questions, it's been an absolute pleasure. I think I made time. Yes, 5 minutes. Thank you all so much for having me. Thank you. Anybody have questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
Just about that last thing you said about the students who's homeless that had now a couple students that I can tell and then you told me are facing housing and food insecurity. And I'm just wondering, like, sometimes I feel so overwhelmed as an instructor where I'm like, this seems like a huge systemic problem.
Yep.
How am I as an individual supposed to help this individual? And it's like, and then also when they tell me things like that, part of me is like, well, then what's the priority? Like, why is college the priority? It seems like something is right, like these basic needs should be met first. I don't know.
No, see, I don't think that way.
Really?
Because I want them to come to college, but I mean,
They
sometimes
don't.
they're having a hard time while they're in college.
Okay.
When they're going through some things personally that may impact it, or, you know, their ability to have
Yeah.
aid or whatever.
Yeah.
For me, as a faculty, support them. Power. Folks you talk to, folks that you know, I mean,